This story takes place on a Friday night at the movies. I went with my best friend Emily, and the theater that we went to was packed. It's pretty much what you would expect with it being a weekend, and we were seeing a relatively new movie as well. After we got inside and sat down, we saw the theater had almost all the seats taken up already. By the time the movie started, I think there were only a couple of empty seats, like 2 or 3. A short time into the movie, I got really hungry. We had seats on the end, really close to the exit, so I decided to get up and get something. I asked Emily if she wanted anything, and she asked me to get her a popcorn. I left the theater and walked out to the hallway. When I did, I happened to notice that a guy got up and left at the exact same time as me. I walked out to the concessions and got in line. The guy got in line right behind me. After waiting in line for about a minute or two, I got our food and then headed back for the theater. When I did, the same guy who was behind me walked back as well. This is when I thought it was strange. If the guy was in line, why didn't he get anything? He just abandoned his place in line when I left? I got a worried feeling that he was following me for some reason. I didn't want to turn around and look back at him, even though I had the urge to. The guy was also now following me at an uncomfortably close distance. He wasn't like 1 foot behind me, but probably within 4 or 5 feet. It almost felt like he was getting closer, so I did look over my shoulder, and the guy was just looking at the ground as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Once I got back into the theater with the movie playing, I felt a little bit better. There were lots of other people around, and I got back to my seat and gave Emily her popcorn. Then I realized that the guy who had been following me was sitting directly behind us. It made me more uncomfortable. I wanted to tell Emily about the guy, but didn't want the guy to somehow overhear. I tried to just watch the movie and forget about it. And for the most part, I did, until the movie ended, and when I thought about leaving, I remembered how the guy had followed me. I was worried he was going to do it again, and I told Emily about the guy right after the movie ended. We decided to try to leave in the crowd of people and hope the guy wouldn't be able to follow us. We both got up and saw people filing into a line to get out of the door. Of course, as soon as we got up, the guy behind us did too. We walked over and sort of cut in the line right in front of somebody else, so that the guy wasn't able to get directly behind us. He actually tried cutting right in line behind us too, but then stopped, probably realizing that it wouldn't work. When we got outside the door, there was a women's restroom literally right there. We both walked inside of it and waited in for a few moments. By the time we left back out into the crowded hallway, we couldn't see the guy at all. It seemed like, thankfully, we had lost him. We could then leave without having to worry about that weirdo. We walked through the lobby of the theater and out the front door to the parking lot. When we had taken just a few steps outside, though, I saw something. I could see my car that we had taken, and the guy was actually standing right next to it. He was standing behind it, but I could still see him. He was sort of just standing around like he was waiting for us. I immediately got the chills. I grabbed Emily's arm and we stopped. We turned around and walked right back into the theater. How on earth did he know that was my car? We ended up going to the counter and telling an employee about it. One of the managers offered to actually drive up my car to the door and tell the guy to leave if he attempted to follow. We watched the manager go outside, and when he got to my car, the guy actually walked away. The manager didn't even have to say anything to him. When we got my car, we drove it home carefully to make sure that we weren't followed, which we weren't. Looking back at that night, what creeps me out the most is how the guy knew which car was mine. Had he been following me before that? I really hope not. I went to the movies with my girlfriend. It was a weeknight, and the theater was not very busy, but neither of us worked the next day, so we could stay up as late as we wanted. We went to one of the latest movies playing at the theater. I think it started at like 10 p.m. or so. When we got there, we saw immediately how quiet the theater was, which was nice. After getting to our seats, we realized that we were the only people at this particular movie. That was pretty cool, and it's something that's never happened to me before. We could sit any place we wanted to, and we chose towards the top and in the exact middle for the best view. As we watched the previews, we thought maybe somebody else would come into the movie, but nobody did. The movie started, and about an hour went by. When it was more than half over, I saw out of the corner of my eye somebody entering the auditorium. I looked over and saw a man walking in. It struck me as really strange, because the movie was more than half over by now. Why was he just getting here now? The guy looked around the theater and seemed to look at me for a second, then he walked up to the front, and I think he went in either the very first row or the second row. He seemed to have sort of long hair, and within seconds, I no longer saw him. He kind of sat back in his seat so far that he was completely out of view. After that brief distraction, my girlfriend and I were whispering to each other about how strange it was for the guy to get there so late, and then we went back to watching the movie. About 10 minutes later is when I noticed him again. He turned around and then stuck his head up from his seat. He was looking right at us and slowly making himself taller and taller so that he was towering over his chair and getting in the way of the screen. In the dark theater, I couldn't tell much details of the man, aside from his sort of long hair and what appeared to be a small beard. I whispered to my girlfriend, "Is this guy serious?" We laughed a little, but after about 15 seconds, it was really unfunny. The guy finally lowered back down and disappeared behind his seat again. After about 5 more minutes, he was at it again. This time, we observed him crawling out of the aisle that he was in and into another one a few rows behind. Then he just sat there facing us, staring at us. It was starting to get creepy, and we were getting uncomfortable with this guy in there. I considered walking over to the man and asking him what he was doing, but I really didn't want to. The movie had maybe 30 minutes left, and so we decided to just try our best to ignore him. Then he stood up and just like that walked away towards the exits. My girlfriend looked at me and whispered, "Finally." I replied, "I know, right?" After that, we watched the ending of the movie. When it was over, we got up to leave. We both walked to the side where the stairs were that led down to the exit. After going down a few steps, I'm really not sure why, but I just decided to lean over the railing and look down to the other side. When I did, I saw the weird guy. He had never even left the theater. He was up against the wall, as if he was hiding from us and just waiting for us to walk around the corner. I told my girlfriend to stop. She was ahead of me, like 5 steps further than I was, maybe 5 more from the bottom. She stopped and looked back at me. I waved her to come back to me, and as I was doing this, I saw the guy look up and notice me. We made eye contact, and I just asked the guy what he was doing. He got up and went around the corner and started walking fast up the stairs toward us without saying a word. My girlfriend and I both ran across to the other side of the seats. When we did, the man sped up and started to run. I didn't think we would be able to make it back around to the exit, so I found an emergency exit door that went right to the outside, and I ran to it and went out. We came out on the side of the building and both ran all the way back to my car. I was just happy we were both back in the car and safe and could drive home. I think something might have been wrong with that guy. I'm really glad I spotted him, because I don't know what he was planning to do. During my college years, I worked in a movie theater. It was a theater about 5 miles from my house, and I'd work mostly on nights and weekends. This particular story is from a weeknight that I was working on a closing shift. The theater closed 20 minutes after the last movie of the night started. I remember that it was pretty quiet with it being a weeknight, and there were maybe 15 or so people in the last movie. When it started, there were 4 of us working, and then it went down to 2, me and my coworker George. We turned off some of the lights, but kept the concessions open. The movie was about 10 minutes in, and when it was almost time to close up, I saw a man walk in the front door. To be quite honest, he sort of looked homeless. He had a small backpack and dirty, wrinkly clothes with messy hair. He walked in and sat in one of the chairs in the lobby area. I started to clean up a little bit behind the concessions counter where I was working, and George was a little ways over at the ticket counter. 10 minutes later, it was time to lock up. The guy was still sitting there in the lobby as I locked the front door to the theater. I thought about telling him to leave, but he really didn't have to leave until the movie ended. After locking the doors, I returned to the counter and then saw somebody approaching from the hallway of the auditoriums. It was a customer looking to buy some popcorn, and I helped him. When I was done, I noticed that the man in the lobby was gone. I hadn't seen him leave or anything because I was busy, and I stayed behind the counter for a little while longer in case anybody else wanted to get some food. After several minutes of nothing, I decided to get a start on cleaning, and I went to the hallway to start. I left the counter and walked over to the hallway where the auditoriums were. It was pretty long and all carpeted. I was going to change out the garbages, not near where the movie was going on, but as soon as I got out into the hallway, I saw the same guy who had been sitting in the lobby. He was at the far end of the hallway, and was going near the movie that was in progress. I knew he didn't have a ticket, and I walked over to the man to tell him that he couldn't be back here. I asked him what he was doing, but he didn't answer me. The guy completely ignored me and walked right past me and down the hallway to the other theaters. He kept walking and then went inside the men's bathroom. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I ended up changing the garbages that I had planned to, but I also kept my eye on the bathrooms if the man left. He stayed in there the entire time that I was over there, and I went back to the front lobby to tell George about the guy. George was a little bit concerned, but suggested that we wait and hope the guy leaves. I went back down to check the hallways periodically and never saw the man. Eventually, the last movie ended. It was almost midnight by now. The people that were at the movies all left within 10 minutes of the movie ending. At that point, it was just us in the theater and the guy in the bathroom. I decided to go and approach the bathroom and shout inside asking if anybody was in there and announcing that the theater was closing. When I did, nobody answered me. I thought maybe the man actually had left, and I started to feel a little bit better. I began to walk in, but right after I took my first step, I heard the man yell. He shouted at me in an extremely loud and aggressive tone that if I came in there, I was dead. I stopped and left without going inside. George came over and yelled in, asking why the man was acting that way, but the guy wouldn't answer him. We eventually told the guy that if he wouldn't leave, we were going to call the police. The guy didn't respond to that either, so that's exactly what we did. The police came within 10 minutes, and George and I finished our work and were ready to go home. They had to go in the bathroom to get the guy to leave. However, we were told that when the police entered the bathroom, the guy had broken off a part of one of the soap dispensers and was trying to use it as a weapon. I'm really glad I didn't go inside that bathroom, because I almost did.